Hey everyone, this is Katie from Moonflower Moments. So I'm continuing on my three-part series in which I discuss how I work with spirits of place. Now, of course, I do definitely see like particular spirits of place, such as particular like river entities or folklore that is attached to the land to be spirits of place, though that's not my primary way that I work with them. To me, I work with spirits of place in the sense of the general energy that is tied to a specific location. And to me, it's part of my regular practice, both within my spiritual work as well as my tarot practice, to regularly check in with this energy as it is attached to a location and work with it to make sure that the spirit of place is in the best possible health as possible. So previously on other videos, I talked about how I work with the plant, fungi, and animal allies in my working with the spirits of place in my garden. I then talked about how I work within the spirits of the garden overall, and also the spirits of the grove overall, because I do take care of 9 trees on my property. And today I'm going to talk about how I work with spirit of place within human structures such as the home and culture. So I'm going to start from essentially the smallest part of that, which would be the home that I reside in. And I think it's really interesting because to me, when I first moved into this house, we are living in a beautiful A-frame that needs, it does need quite a bit of work because it was owned by someone who had it for a rent house for like 30 years. So it has like your typical like rent house problems, lots of things that were covered up. But when I came into this space, this tarot room that I'm sitting in right now felt really awfully off. And you would think I would be so excited to have my own like a whole room to devote to tarot and my other interest, but I really was very reluctant to come in here and work within this space. And then one day I overheard something coming in my head, and it was like, you need to use the Little Wizard's Tarot, the Harry Potter tarot that you have, to read for this room. And so I did. And so I really find I get questioned like often, because I talk about this practice semi-frequently on my channel, like how do I know what deck to use to work with the spirit of the place? And in regards to your home, I think a lot of it is intuitive. So for me, I don't know exactly why I picked the Little Wizard's Tarot, other than the fact it was like a newer deck in my collection. So maybe because it was one of the first decks that ever arrived at my mailbox at this location, like there was kind of like a coincidence with timing. But also I really did feel pretty strongly that this was a children's room. And so I wanted something that reflected children. I wanted something that reflected the ages of development. Because I grew up with Harry Potter, it seemed like this was the deck that I needed to use to work within that developmental stage. And also because this is a deck that the stories grew up with me. I grew up on Harry Potter. I have a Harry Potter tattoo. My brother and I, we both have Harry Potter tattoos that are matching. And so this is something that is very integral to my understanding of what it means to be a child and what it means to be an adolescent. And so because I did feel like a youth existed in this room, and there was something that was residually left over, this is the deck that I pulled from. And I don't want to get too far into the reading because to me, like, it was an incredibly sad reading. Any of the negative cards you could possibly get in the tarot are like traditionally negative cards that you could get came out. And then there also seemed to be an abrupt ending to it, which included the Tower. And I really felt like that was what was keeping me from engaging with this room, because something deeply felt off about it. And through working with this deck and pulling about 3 to 4 readings with it, I was able to kind of meet that energy where it was. And then I also knew that, you know, this was an energy that like it had been sitting for a while. And so I didn't want to just like cleanse it and move forward. Like I needed to acknowledge it before I was able to move forward from it. But this deck did give me that point of view to work within that childhood lens, because I did feel like that was definitely an element that was here, like a rough childhood. So this is the deck that I used specifically for my tarot room for that purpose. I no longer use this deck for my tarot room, but I think it is important that like I might have not initially understood why I was gravitating towards these decks, but I've spoken about this before on my channel. Like, if you have a deck that is calling to you, it's because that deck wants to speak to you and you need to listen to that deck's message. And that deck has something in it or in a personal association that you have with that deck that no other deck in your collection has. And I think that that did interpret and help me to understand what was going on within this space. So the next one I use is my more general reader, because we've talked about this so often. I'm not going to spend that much time, but how could I do a video talking about Spirit of Place without talking about my home deck? We have to speak on Illusori. So this deck is incredibly dramatic because I do have a dramatic house. She has like a spiral staircase. She has a gorgeous like loft. She's very 1979. So, you know, we're still working on her. She's got some renovations that need to be done, but she's loaded with charm and her own unique voice. But right before we started the bathroom renovation, where we gutted the entire bathroom down to the studs, I asked this deck how she felt about it. And the exact moment that my husband took the hammer to the wall, I pulled this card, Ruin. And it just made me laugh because it was like so over the top dramatic. Like it felt like I'm being ruined, like you're hammering into my home. But I feel like being able to see this, I was able to see it from the home's perspective, right? Of course that's personification, but like if you actually truly believe that energy exists, if you truly believe that it can exist in locations as harsh, like as strongly as I do, like I want to honor that energy. And so I did several check-ins with it throughout the renovation process. It's still something that we're doing, but I did ask it at the end. It's funny, this card came up. This deck has like that uncanny ability that as soon as I'm looking for a card, it pops up. I asked how it would feel at the end, and I pulled Celebration with 3 of Cups and then Healing with King of Cups. So we're not quite there yet. It's been a very long renovation process, but I do find that this is one of my most cherished decks in my collection. I could never get rid of it. I can't use it for fucking anything else. Like, and I have to use that word to describe it because it's like, I've tried to use this deck to read with friends and it's like, no, I don't want that. I've tried to use it to read for myself. It's like, no, I don't want that. Like, I want to work with Cheryl. I want to work with the house. And it's like, yes, ma'am, I understand. But it is something that I do on a semi-regular basis and I perform a ritual around it, right? Like I said before, I like to gather on other videos, I like to gather items from every single area of the home. So just like a small thing from every single area of the home, lay them out, and then I pull cards either for each of the rooms or just in a general representative of like a placeholder of that energy. But I love it. I think that this deck, because it has a unique voice, is why I picked it, but I can't really describe any other reason why. It was the one that called to me, and that's where it's at. All right, the next one is a brand new deck to my collection, but I feel like I have to share it here because it is the deck that inspired the series. And it is Louisiana Cajun-Creole Tarot by Cajun Conjurer. Cajun Conjurer is a friend of mine in real life, and so I am very happy to finally have this deck in my collection because I know that this is going to help my Spirit of Place understanding and just my relationship with the land explode. So to speak on this deck in particular, I'll keep the box out because I think it's so nice that like we have like a wooden box for it. This deck comes with a huge book, which I will show more in depth in a little second. Like huge workbook. I can't even fit it all on one camera. And essentially what Jared did is that he included like the picture, he has the title because many of the titles have been rearranged to symbolically represent like Cajun and Creole culture, and then a very long write-up about how the governor embodies the particular attributes of the of the emperor. And like for example, I think this is really cool because like that's the artwork, right? And that is an image of governor. And it says here that the emperor's concepts of power and organization through a distinctive Louisiana leadership style that combines personal charisma with a deep understanding of community needs. And I find that to be so cool because if you like walk into my classroom, a lot of it is that I do have pretty strict rules and procedures. The kids do know expectations, but I call my kids, you know, baby and like honey and love. And people in Louisiana have that warmth to their speaking style that I think is perfectly described by what is listed in this book. Like if you see Louisiana authority, it's not going to come from someone being a hard ass, but it's usually going to come from like the baby love. I want what is best for you. Like, I want to help you succeed. And I find that to be a really interesting depiction of the emperor, who's usually depicted as a hard ass. Like, the person who holds authority in Louisiana wouldn't necessarily be that hard ass, but they would be the person that lets you know that they care about you. But I find it to be so cool. And like, I'm going to show the cards in just a second, but like, I have to like really rave on this guidebook. He has, let's see how many spreads. Y'all, oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. All of these freaking spreads. So I didn't count how many that is, but like all of these spreads that are related to areas of my home, like the Mississippi River. I grew up like 20 minutes away from the Mississippi River. It's a huge part of my life. Rougarou shadow spread. My cat's name is Rougarou. Okay, wait, I think there was one with cypress. Let me find the one with cypress. Yeah, here we go. This one has cypress trees. So what wisdom do I need to anchor myself? And I have cypress trees that are right outside of myself. So I love this. Like, I'm so excited to work with this deck. So with that being said, here are some of the cards. This is a prototype copy of it because he did give me like an early release. Here are the backs. But this is, all of the majors are renamed. So for example, Le Traiteur is like the magician. Traiteurs in Louisiana culture are people that combine like plant and also traditional Catholic prayers to heal other people. We have Nanan, which would be godmother. Maman, which is grandmother. The governor, like I already spoke on before. Catechism for the Hierophant, because that's the prominent religion that's in this area. Mon cher means like lovers. The truck for chariot, because everyone uses the trucks to do their daily jobs. We have resilience. Guys, I work in a place that is very, very close to where Tabasco is built. So I like work like very close to the Tabasco factory. Some of my kids actually live like on that property. And so to see this, guys, like I have a tarot deck that reflects home to me. It's just, it's perfect. The Fisherman, Fadado, or Fedado. I'm sorry, like I grew up in a place in Louisiana where like we had like a little Cajun influence, but I've been living in this area over here for 10 years and it's heavily Cajun. So I don't know all of the French words, but I think that's the beautiful thing about the book is that like I bought a home in this area. I might not know everything about the particular like Cajun French aspects of it, but it is something that will help me to become more in tune with this. The Law, Mardi Gras for the Hanged Man, Hurricane here for death, and that is so powerful. That's a fucking gut punch to think about. Bon Temps for temperance, Rougarou for the devil, and like I said, all of this is based in that folklore. The Derrick for which is an oil rig for tower. Evangeline for star, La Lune for the moon. All right, I gotta keep going because I don't want to just show you this whole deck. Beau Soleil for the sun. The Back Door for judgment. This is based off a popular song where a guy, I read in the guidebook earlier, the guy basically is staying out all night and partying and not considering his choices. And so he's entering in the back door at night so he doesn't wake up his parents. And so he has to come in consequence and come into an understanding. I keep wanting to say like his parents end up having like a come to Jesus moment with him because like he's sneaking in all night, like after partying all night. So it's the accountability of like, hey son, we know you can do better. And then Joie de Vie, which is of course this little crawfish boil. But it's so beautiful. Knock is king, Tante is aunt. This is the knight. And then we have the page. And then all of these. So I am going to do a full walkthrough of this on my channel, but I of course wanted to include this here because like I said, I have a guidebook that has been written, a deck that has been created by someone who's lived in this area for 40 plus years, someone who I consider to be a friend. And it's like, I know there are just subtle little nods throughout this deck to parts of my culture that I'm so excited to explore. And I do know a lot of it because I am born and raised in Louisiana. So I know, for example, this is Edwin Edwards, and Edwin Edwards is like known as like Louisiana's most crooked governor, but the thing is he was the most honest crook that ever did live. That's what my mom always used to say. So he would admit that he was cheating and he was stealing and he was gambling, but people actually appreciated him for being so open and honest about his issues and his problems. And he was voted into office not just one time, but like multiple times in multiple political roles because people were so appreciative of his honesty. So it's an interesting concept to have like someone that is the world's biggest crook, not the world's biggest crook, but if you have someone in Louisiana, one of the world's biggest crooks, as the Seven of Swords. It's just tremendous. So I'm looking forward to using this deck, but like this is a deck that I can take outside of my yard. So in my other videos, I talked a lot about working with the plants and the animals that were in the yard and just the area around me. This is a deck that I can take anywhere. So when I go on field trips, when I go to the swamps, when I visit my parents back home, you know, it is primarily Cajun and Creole. So, you know, the more South Louisiana is probably where it's going to fit the most, which is okay. That's where I tend to be anyway. But this is a deck that will go on so many different adventures with me and like teach me what I can learn from this culture and help me become more embedded in this place that I've chosen to call home. And my friend actually gave me the print of this card because this is my favorite. This is the Four of Cups. And I just find it to be incredible that I get to have this artwork too. So with that being said, I don't know. I'm sure that I'm going to tell you more about it as we go. That card is so beautiful. I love it. But that is it. I'm going to go ahead and get to the end because I might as well. Ace of Fiddles. All right, so that's the Louisiana Cajun-Creole Tarot. I know I spent a long time on that one, but y'all had a lot to say about it. Whoop. The box is actually really nicely made, too. Love it. All right, so another deck that I use to work with like the larger ideas of my culture is going to be my Illuminated deck of Holy Souls. Like I stated before, Jared chose the Hierophant as the to represent catechism because like Catholicism is the dominant religion in this area. So what I like to do is pull one of these cards and place it on my altar, and they all have like this little phrase underneath it. But this helps connect me to the spirits of place. But really what I'm trying to say in this video in particular is like the spirits of culture, right? But the culture is of course tied to the place. So I'm using those two terms interchangeably. I think I spent a long time in my life resisting those Catholic roots because I did grow up Catholic. And while by no means do I consider myself to be a Christian, I do really find it very comforting to pull, for example, let's see what we have here. Okay, St. Jude. I mean, of course, I think every city in the country has something that is in relation to St. Jude, but we have a street that's called St. Jude. And so I had pulled this card, and then as I was driving down the street, I happened to come across St. Jude, and it just reminded me of the themes that this card portrayed. So in particular, it says, bring me hope in times of despair and help me trust in God's light to guide my life. And there was this little sitting area in front of this lady's yard. And of course I didn't stop, but like I noticed it as I went by. And I think that's the purpose of working with spirits of place, location, culture, just using tarot, but also my spiritual practice to be more aware, is that I might have not realized or seen that little bench in front of this tree, but because I had just pulled St. Jude, I thought about how contemplative I could be if I was sitting underneath that tree on that particular bench, and how that tree could bring me that hope in times of despair. I've gone through probably half this deck at this point. I was pulling like one a week, and then I ended up buying this larger book. And so let me go ahead and say, whoop. Let's pull somebody. I don't know if this person's in here because I haven't pulled for them. This is Saint Notburga. Inspire me with your humility and dedication, helping me to serve with love and devotion. Let me see if it's in the book. Nope, Notburga is not in the book. It does have a lot of them. All right, we'll do Saint Barbara. Let's see if she's in there. It's such a big book. Sorry you can't see all of it. Oh, we do have Barbara. Okay, so let's go to 94. So in the cases of when I don't have the book to reference, I just look up information about them online. Here we go. So Barbara, and y'all, this is a hella cool card, okay? Essentially what I just read is that we don't even know if this person ever existed because she was decanonized in 1969. But according to the legend, she was the daughter of a pagan, and her beauty was so beautiful that her dad trapped her in a tower. And then she eventually was handed over to a judge who told her dad to kill her. And he did, but he was then struck by lightning. So that's why she's the patron of those in danger of sudden death. Originally from lightning, later from cannonballs, gunfire, and mines. That's so interesting. So if I'm wanting to work with Barbara, I could look into the different ways that Barbara shows up in this area. So I might pay more attention to the towers. There's this very large tower that's in the parish right over from me, and like it gets shown a lot on architectural TV. So I might go out of my way to visit that tower, to engage with it, I really, honest to God, want to see it. Now that I've kind of pulled this as an example, I might keep her out on my altar as a reminder, like maybe this weekend or next weekend, to go take a drive and notice the towers. But like I said, that's what tarot does, is tarot reminds us to be more present. And it just so happens that we can do it in a general way of like looking for a particular tower, or I could look for street names that have St. Barbara, or even if like there's not really a clear connection, still understanding that this is the faith of the people where I live, and letting me see how that faith has influenced the way that this community works, but also how it interacts together, what things we've chosen to prioritize over others. It's helping to give me a deeper understanding. So I've been thoroughly enjoying that. I think that this is such a treasure deck. You can tell it's one that I use a lot. Any altar deck that I have stays in its box. So like I feel like this one always stays in its box, even though boxes are difficult. All right, I'm gonna pause it so I can pick it up. Okay. And we're almost there. All right, so we were speaking about my culture. Now I want to look into New Orleans culture. So I did read this book top to bottom. This is New Orleans Voodoo. And I'm not a practitioner of voodoo. I don't know a lot about voodoo, but I did find this to be such an enlightening read because it helped me to understand that the traitors that I had spoken about before, who combine healing medicine with traditional Catholic prayers, a lot of the healing medicine comes from the tradition of voodooism in particular. And so I just find that to be an interesting thing. But I read this book shortly after I received the NOLA tarot cats. And so this deck and that book are kind of intertwined with me, even though like I didn't use this deck to really explore any tenets of voodooism. I don't really feel like that's my place, because I feel like you do need to seek expertise from mentors and from spiritual guides. And you know, I really just kind of read this book from a more intellectual like idea perspective. But I feel like this deck is associated with New Orleans. We have New Orleans from that side, but I think like buying like these two things in close tandem with each other really reminded me so much about how I love the feel of New Orleans. So while that's not the area that I work with in my backyard, when I did go to New Orleans a few months ago, I did bring a deck with me, and I sat down and I like read for the spirits of place within that. And so I did it a couple different ways. I did read for a bird that was in the area. I read for a tree that was in the area. But just in general, I think Danny Mystic said one time that if you blindfolded her and like plopped her down in another state besides Louisiana, and then plopped her down in Louisiana, she'd be able to feel the difference. And I feel that's the same way with like New Orleans. New Orleans has such a particular feel. And so I really wanted to sink into that energy and just ask myself, what can this archetypal city teach me? And I used this deck for that purpose. But it's fun to have a particular deck that's like, I'm so flippin' lucky. Like I have 2 decks now that are like specifically associated with Louisiana, and I love that, and I can nerd out about that. This looks like my kitty cat. Like he looks so much like Rougarou. It is unbelievable. But it makes me very happy to know that, I mean, while I could use any deck to read for this region, that the people in Louisiana are producing works of art and that reinforce the beauty and the themes and the concepts of what it means to exist within this space. And you can definitely tell from this artist's perspective who did live in New Orleans, she definitely leans into the funkiness of it. But like this artwork and like this dirty ass like street, very, very New Orleans. Like the streets are shit and they're very dirty, but then in the background we have this rich architecture. And that's the juxtaposition of what it is to be in that place. So I'm quite fond of it. All right, and then I think we only have one more. Wow, okay, so this is the end of the series, last one. Now, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this deck is going to play with my friend Jared, Cajun Conjurer's Louisiana Cajun-Creole Tarot, because this deck does reflect the general southern region. So I got this deck very early on in my tarot practice, and I've gone back and forth about it, back and forth about it, back and forth about it. And right now my feelings are like, I love it. Now that might change in like a year from now, because it goes from quick favor to like neglect like really quickly. And I don't really know why, other than the fact that I think other decks come into its place that fit a little bit closer to Louisiana for me. But with that being said, like the Cajun-Creole Tarot obviously reflects like Acadiana, which is where I live. New Orleans is kind of closer to where I grew up, but like my father is from closer to Mississippi. He grew up in like Louisiana, but closer to Mississippi. And so his family was like country. And so I do like to use this deck to help tap me into those spirits of place. So we have property that is, like I said, like I think it's like 30 minutes away from Mississippi. And when I went up to this property, I brought this deck and I pulled from this deck to engage with the property and like that, the feeling of it. And I think in my case, like, I know not everyone is fortunate enough to have a deck that geographically represents the region that they're from. Like, I'm really glad to see that, because when I do think of my grandmother, like, she has large sassafras trees on her backyard. My grandmother used to make raccoon spaghetti. Like I said, she was country. My grandmother was really country. Country with like hunting rifle and anything. If she could eat it, she was gonna shoot it. And it just reminds me of that. And I hope you can hear the smile in my voice, because it is home to me, right? It's just a different home. But it allowed me to work with the spirits of that land. And I know that I have a lot more work to do on that property as time comes. So like I mentioned, I know that most of these decks, if not all of them, are really rooted in a particular culture for me, which is how I've been able to kind of collect them over the years. Anything that reminds me of home is something that I tend to purchase. And you might not have that for your region, but I think one thing that you can do is, like in my first video where I discussed how I worked with like plant, animal, and fungi allies to engage with the spirits of place within my garden, I think it's important for you to step outside and whatever catches your notice, even if it's just the physical land. If you happen to see a clover that is really bright and green, then you can go back to your collection and you can pick a deck that reminds you of luck, or it reminds you of the Wheel of Fortune, because clover, luck, Wheel of Fortune, all of that. A deck that is bright green. So don't feel like you have to have a deck that represents your particular cultural entity in order to be able to work with these. It's just a matter of like sitting down, noticing what's around you, noticing the patterns that are around you, and if a deck calls to you, then that's the deck that you need to use. So I really had a lot of fun filming this series. I am so thankful to share this space with you, and I hope to see y'all again next time.